but it is overwhelming. If you don't understand the importance of the British exit or the Brexit, not sure what to tell you, other than it was a vote to separate from the European Union and to reclaim once again their own state sovereignty overall. And it destroyed the markets. Upheaval, you know. Nobody likes uncertainty, least of all the markets. They become the great hallmark of how uncertain the world is. And anytime you watch the graphs and they go like this, it's because of uncertainty. Not because of necessarily a group of facts. We know these things are going to be problematic, but just uncertainty. And anytime uncertainty rises, the market takes a dip. And for those of us that might be tied to the market, that can be rather disheartening. And you just want to say, stop the world, I want to get off. Then there's ISIS, email servers, President Trump, President Clinton, President Obama, President somebody else. Taxes. How come they never go down? They only go up. Even the temporary taxes. Somehow the only thing the legislators seem to be able to vote on is to continue the temporary taxes. Obamacare. The Supreme Court. Gun control. Second Amendment. First Amendment. The Zika virus. All the planets are lining up. 4 blood moons. War in Iraq, war in Afghanistan, tensions rising in the Far East and in the Near East and in the Middle East, Russian jets doing flybys of American ships, earthquakes in Japan, earthquakes in LA, earthquakes in Ecuador, Islamic terrorism, tornadoes, tsunamis, hurricanes, famine, economic uncertainty. Are you uptight yet? Shall I continue? Because the list just keeps going on and on and on. It sometimes feels like the world is unraveling. And things are just getting worse. And at some point in time, you just want to yell, stop the world, I want to get off. Because there's just too much. And let's forget all of the international problems and all of the national problems, and let's just spend a little bit of time thinking about your own family. Your extended family. The relationships you have that are strong, and the relationships you have that are strongly antagonistic. Folks, our experiences are nearly universal. How are we supposed to respond when the world looks like it's unraveling? Here's the question for us. How am I supposed to respond when the world looks like it's unraveling? I got to tell you, though, for the Christian, even though if your first reaction is like my reaction, is to start wringing your hands and living in angst, listen, that is a non-Christian reaction. That is an un-Christ-led reaction. That is an unspirit-filled reaction. That is a reaction born not of faith, but strictly of fear. The non-Christian has all kinds of reasons to wring their hands and wonder what's going to happen in the world because they have no concept of a promise that ultimately all things will work out for the glory of God. In fact, even the disasters in your own life will someday, and it may not be in this life, but I have the promise of God's word that they will someday be somehow in ways that you and I can't fathom and see for God's glory. He's going to do it because he said he would do it. Even amidst enormous uncertainty, outrageous opportunities for fear, even amidst national, international, or in the family upheavals, he is still sovereign. One of the great lessons out of the book of Daniel, one of my favorite Old Testament prophets, one of the great lessons out of the book of Daniel is that, hang on there just a second, God's sovereign over the nations. He's the one that causes kings and presidents to rise and to fall. No one assumes office, whether it's the presidency, the kingship, the mayorship, or the guy that picks up the trash without his say-so. You understand what it means to worship a sovereign God like this? It means that we have the right and responsibility to look at the promise and to hold on to that promise. Because we have a sure anchor. That anchor that goes beyond the veil. We read it in the book of Hebrews. Quite simply, the Christian is told to look up. And we're not looking up in the sense of, I'm going to defy the world. I don't care how bad things get. You just smile. No. That's not Christian either. That's a denial, perhaps, of reality. We're told to look up, not because if you smile hard enough you can ignore how bad it is, but we're told to look up, to lift up our eyes, because all of these things are demonstrations that the times are growing shorter and our redemption is oh so close. I'm not saying it doesn't get difficult, but I'm saying that we have a promise, a certainty that we're on the winning team in Jesus Christ. You ever watch those movies when the first scene is like the old man kind of in a situation and he starts to remember, and the rest of the movie is what he remembered? And in those scenes, somehow the Hollywood magicians are able to get us to fear for the guy's life at certain times in the movie, where if you just stop and think about the plot point, the opening scene was him as an old man. He survived. Right? We ought to be able to sit back in the movie theater and look. It's like, oh, I don't know how he's going to escape this, but clearly he does. Folks, we've read the last chapter. Our redemption is nigh. Sometimes we have to be honest. I don't know how I'm going to survive this, but I know that I will. Do you understand the difference that inspires? Today's passage is an extended passage. It's in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 21. We're going to be in verses 5 through 36. We're going to be here this week and next week as the Lord empowers us to do so. Jesus uses 3 items to speak about his impending return, and he gives us a framework for our reaction to his return as well as to all of the events that seem to be pointers to it, that are pointers to it. The state of the affairs leading up to his return might get desperate. I guess that's an understatement. But he takes the question of the disciples about this temple, and he speaks of the end times, which we refer to as the tribulation. This period of 7 years of God's wrath coming upon the earth is depicted in the book of Revelation. We can read that later. And finally, he uses this illustration of a tree to teach us to open our eyes so that we are prepared to live in light of his return. Listen, there's the key. We are prepared to live in light of his return. That is what changes our response. So, if you will, would you stand with me as we honor the Lord's word together? We're going to hear Luke 21, verses 5 through 36. It's a longer section. And while some were talking about the temple, that it was adorned with beautiful stones and votive gifts, he said, "As for these things which you're looking at, the days will come in which there will not be left one stone upon another, which will not be torn down." They questioned him, saying, "Teacher, when therefore will these things happen? And what will be the sign when these things are about to take place?" And he said, "See to it that you are not misled. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he,' and 'the time is near.' Do not go after them. When you hear of wars and disturbances, do not be terrified. For these things must take place first, but the end does not follow immediately." Oh, there's a delay. Then he continued by saying to them, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be great earthquakes, and in various places plagues and famines, and there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. But before all these things they will lay their hands on you and will persecute you, delivering you to the synagogues and prisons, bringing you before kings and governors for my name's sake. And it will lead to an opportunity for your testimony." Boy, that's powerful. I'm going to read it again. It will lead to an opportunity for your testimony. So make up your minds, not to prepare beforehand to defend yourselves, for I will give you utterance and wisdom, which none of your opponents will be able to resist or refute. But you will be betrayed, even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. And you will be hated by all because of my name. Yet not a hair of your head will perish. by your endurance, you will gain your lives. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then recognize that her desolation is near. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains, and those who are in the midst of the city must leave, and those who are in the country must not enter the city, because these are days of vengeance, so that all things which are written will be fulfilled. Woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing babies in those days, for there will be great distress upon the land, and wrath to this people. And they will fall by the edge of the sword and will be led captive into all the nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. That's what you see on CNN. Verse 25. There will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth dismay among the nations, and perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves. Men fainting from fear and the expectation of the things that are coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great authority. But when these things begin to take place, listen up, when these things begin to take place, straighten up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Then he told them a parable. Behold the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they put forth leaves, you see it, and you know for yourselves that summer is now near. So you also, when you see these things happening, recognize that the kingdom of God is near. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Be on guard, so that your hearts will not be weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and the worries of life, and that day will not come upon you suddenly like a trap, for it will come upon all those who dwell on the face of the earth. But keep on the alert at all times, praying that you may have strength to escape all these things that are about to take place, and to stand before the Son of Man. Thank you. You may be seated. That's a sobering passage. And I got to tell you, I understand the temptation that a passage on the future brings, and that temptation is, I'm going to find out what's coming next, because I just want to know what happens next. And we're told a little bit about what happens next, but that's not the function of the passage. The function of the passage and the function of the book of Revelation is not to kind of tickle our fancy and help us to get a glimpse into the future and to feel really good about knowing what's coming. And it's not about giving us a glimpse so that we can be excited or understand something. It's not about just tweaking our intellect. It's about letting you know that things are about to get really, really horrible, but God's going to win. So hang on. That's the message. So when we start and we look at the text, we'll just begin with the concept that's presented, and that this is temporary. Folks, this world is temporary. These bones are temporary. Your life's temporary. This building is completely temporary. Your car, your house, your job, your mortgage, temporary. The family upheaval, the wars, the rumors of wars, all the stuff that CNN and Fox News show 24/7 a day, temporary. Get a temporary understanding. Get a hold of the fact that this world is not eternal. Because I think sometimes we get so torqued up and we get so worked up over the issues of the day because we keep thinking that this is all there is. We've got to get this is all there is out of our heads. This is not all that is. It happens to be, if you are a student of the dates at all, it happens to be Wednesday, April the 1st, 33 AD, when Jesus says this. I like being able to put a date to it. Jesus had just had his controversies with the religious leaders. He's watched a widow deposit her little tiny gift, 2 little copper coins, into the temple treasury. And he's indicated his understanding that she, in her poverty, has given more than anybody else on that day. She gave in faith everything she had to live on. She has no way of buying an Arby's sandwich on the way home. Everybody else who were depositing large bags of money, large amounts, They gave, actually, Jesus says, out of their excess. You know, the stuff that's left over after you pay the bills? If you don't know what that's like, I understand. But it's the stuff that was left over after they paid the bills, that's what they were giving out. The disciples, I think, when Jesus points this lady out, I suspect, as I try to read between the lines here, I think they were taken aback. And they probably very likely voiced the opinion that this temple that they're standing in was amazingly magnificent, and you got to tell me expensive. I mean, you can go through and you can read the descriptions of Herod's temple, and it was made of the finest fitting marble, and it was hand polished. And even the joints, Josephus, the historian, says the joints virtually disappeared when they would take the stones and lay them together. So fine was the stonework. But then there were large segments, gates, and the entire inner temple court or temple itself that was covered in gold, where the gold would be hammered out in sheets and then wrapped around it. And when you approached Jerusalem, you would look out and your eyes would be blinded with the pure white polished marble and the gold reflecting off of the temple. It was astounding. Let me tell you, you don't build an edifice like that with 2 copper coins from old widows. Jesus has to get their eyes off the temporary. Jesus, they say, can't you at least recognize the beauty and look around you and be amazed? Aren't you proud of this great edifice? You know, we ask the same thing about Jesus every time we kind of seek his approval on our accomplishments. Look at everything that I've done, Jesus. Look at all that I've accomplished. Look how great my little kingdom has become. And here's Jesus. He's the manufacturer of the entire universe. That's pretty difficult to try and show him how glorious everything we've done next to that is. And he knows something that they're not grasping. He knows that in just 37 years, that temple that they're gazing at, that is however glorious it is, will be torn down. Civil war is about to erupt in Rome in just a couple of decades. Jesus knows this. Remember, Jesus is the Son of God. He didn't, by the way, he didn't take his omniscience and lose it. He still had it. He's still God. So he knows that in 37 years, everything is going to be gone. The Jews would rebel against Rome during this time. It would all be kind of a catalytic moment when Emperor Nero would commit suicide. If you're familiar with Roman history at all, that's fine. If you're not, know that at some point in time, Emperor Nero, really horrible guy, commits suicide. And the nation is plunged into civil war as 4 of the generals kind of look at the same time and think, I can be the next emperor. And they pick up their swords and they call their armies behind them, and civil war erupts. A fellow by the name of Vespasian wins. He has a son named Titus. And in AD 70, in the midst of a Jewish rebellion, he gives his son Titus the task of finishing off the rebellion that started in Jerusalem. Titus lines up his armies, holds siege to Jerusalem over a period of many days, until finally the city of Jerusalem crumbles under the onslaught. The siege has its horrible effect. Inside the city, roving bands of people were killing and being killed. And as soon as his soldiers break into the city, they obliterate it in the process, including the temple. A passage, verses 5 through 25, depicts what is for us ancient history. It says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies. He's talking about that AD 70 event in which Titus Vespasian, the Roman general at that time, takes Jerusalem by force and destroys it. Now, you want to talk about a time for the disciples where they would think that their entire world was coming undone. Because what is the very foundation of all of Judaism if it wasn't the temple in Jerusalem? And the Jews had come to believe by that point in time that God would never permit anything that bad to happen to the temple. Ironically enough, it was a spiritual assault on the temple, Rome trying to put up pillars in the temple, that caused the rebellion. It's crucial for us to understand that this is describing history, because the follow-up serves to tell us what is still yet to come. Very early on in the book of Deuteronomy, we receive the principle that when a prophet arises, he's going to do two things. He's going to give a short-term prophecy and a long-term prophecy. And you'll know he's a real prophet of God if the short-term prophecy comes to pass. If the short-term prophecy comes to pass, then the long-term one can be trusted as well. Other principles that were there, but that's the one that we're looking at. And Jesus gives them both prophecies. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, that's the short term. The long term, I'm coming back. The first one was fulfilled absolutely to detail. You can go in and you can read all kinds of books about it. I can point you to some if you want them. I don't want to take up the whole hour for this. But Jesus fulfills the first one to the finest degree. That means that we can look forward to the next one and count on it. And Jesus says this all to the disciples in a context of getting them to think outside of this temporary world. This is just temporary. Not only, he says, will the temple be destroyed, but this world and this universe will be destroyed. Look at what he says in verse 33. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Heaven and earth will pass away. Heaven. He's not talking in this instance about the place where God has his throne. He's talking about the universe. It's going to pass away. Peter tells us that all of the elements will be consumed in a blazing heat. Heaven and earth will pass away. Folks, this is temporary. This is very encouraging, Pastor. Thank you for telling me that. In the meantime, we look at the world and we see everything coming unglued, and it makes us feel horrible. What am I supposed to do about that? Listen, we need to know that all of this stuff points to Jesus. And the disciples are, when? How? What are the signs? That's what they want to know. And so Jesus points them to a tree, and he uses that illustration. He says, when you see the leaves sprouting on a tree, you know summer's coming. Look, all of these things that I'm describing, they are indicators. They're like sprouting leaves. You know that the divine summer of eternity in God's presence is fast approaching. And so he gives a bunch of signs. He says, wars and rumors of wars, verses 9 and 10. So we already mentioned just 37 years later, there's going to be this civil war that erupts and rebellion, and eventually Rome is going to silence it and put it down. But it's not just that. I mean, history is littered with the story of warfare. As a matter of fact, history seems to be the story of warfare, as one nation rises up against another, as one people group rises up against another. The First World War was supposed to be the war that ended all wars. Well, so is the second one. And the third one will be too. What about the war in Kuwait? What about the war in Afghanistan? And the list goes on and on. Vietnam, Korea, just pick your choice. Wars and rumors of wars. And we don't really know what's happening in Crimea. What's Russia actually doing? Well, there's some things we know and some things we don't because our media doesn't report them. Wars and rumors of wars, echoes of wars. Wars fought far away and wars being fought near. Then he also says in verses 9 and in verse 25, he points to disturbances. It's just a nice word for political upheaval. Hello? Political upheaval? That seems to be most of what's happening. Political upheaval, intrigue, a standard of living things. The political wars in the U.S., by the way, are absolutely nothing compared to the bloody coups that happen in a lot of nations around the world. America is very unique. Only in America do we, well, there are other nations that have followed our course, so it's not necessarily true that way. But in America, we have a system of government where every 4 or 8 years we cast votes. We pick somebody else to be the leader of our nation. And normally we do it without bloodshed. It's very unusual. But that kind of political intrigue has shaken the nations for centuries. Then there's natural disasters. I've had my fill about those. Famines and earthquakes and tsunamis and hurricanes, and you just go down the list. Does it seem like they're increasing? I don't know. There's different theories about them. There's theories that say they're increasing, and they pull out the charts, and they put the plot points that this seems like we're getting more and more earthquakes lately. And then there's other theories that say, well, really, it's just the globe is shrunk because we've got satellites and 24/7 news coverage. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. But there sure does seem to be a lot of natural disasters. Then he goes on to a category that we really don't see much of, but the celestial signs. And you might think, well, we had the strawberry moon the other week, and that was kind of pretty if you got out and you looked at it. And then we had the 4 blood moons that John Hagee went crazy over last year. And then we had, not too long ago, all of the planets lined up in a unique display they haven't seen for 60 years. Well, those aren't the celestial signs being described here. We're talking about stuff that we haven't yet seen, but are going to come. Because it's going to be so significant that verse 26, people will be fainting from fear in the expectation of things to come. Boy, there's an encouraging lesson there for this Sunday morning. Things are about to get worse. Pastor, I came to church to be encouraged. Hold on, the encouragement gets plugged into that. You don't get encouraged by denying the way things are. You get encouraged by recognizing the end game. And the end game is that Jesus Christ is coming back. I mean, it doesn't take much of a tour through the news channels of the internet, be careful where you go, to see that all of these things seem to be happening with increased significance. People are afraid. Fear grips people most when these events strike near. But even today when they strike far away, we've got so much news coverage, we're fearful anyhow. In fact, that's what the 24-hour news cycle is designed to do, to keep you afraid so that you'll continually tune in. The greater signs are not yet happening, but they will. The same way Jesus says in Matthew that the contractions given to a pregnant woman increase in severity and frequency. All of history is racing to this moment in verse 27. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. By the way, it comes right out of Daniel. The end is not about us. It's about Jesus. And if the end is not about us and the end is about Jesus, then that means the present is not about us. It is about Jesus. That means that all of the things that we are tempted to invest all of our life in obtaining are temporary and ultimately useless. The letter to Titus calls the appearing of Jesus our blessed hope. It's what we have as Christians. We look forward to that moment. God has never promised that he's going to fix this world. He's promised to replace this world. North American Christianity has given birth to the idea that the end times is the story of us. It's all about what the church is going to be doing or not going to be doing. But nothing is further from scriptural truth. It is always about Jesus Christ being revealed as the holy and righteous judge of the earth. The very name of the last book in your Bible, the Revelation, is not about the revelation of things that are about to happen. It is about the revelation of Jesus Christ. It is about Jesus being revealed. And folks, if we think we know him, we don't know him near enough. John the Apostle, if you go in and you read the first chapter of the book of Revelation, I encourage you to do that this afternoon. John the Apostle, who calls himself throughout as the disciple whom Jesus loved throughout his gospel, who considers himself as somebody who is so deeply marked by the love and presence of Jesus Christ that he knew that Jesus loved him. When he turns around in the book of Revelation chapter 1 and he sees Jesus revealed, he passes out because Jesus is greater than he comprehended. So, dear Christian, let me leave you with this week as we get ready to look at the rest of this text next week. Be encouraged when the signs increase. We'll look deeper into our response next week, but it is embodied there in verse 28. Don't wring your hands in fear. Straighten up. Lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing nigh. Come, Lord Jesus.